So besides acquisition controversies, there are controversies that involve the consumption of products or services. Nearly 1/3 of high school students and almost half of college students have engaged in binge drinking. That's defined as drinking more than 5 drinks in one setting. We're going to cover 6 consumption controversies, beginning with underage drinking and smoking. But before we begin, here's a really great review question for you. Why is compulsive buying an acquisition controversy and not a consumption controversy? Pause the video a minute, see if you can answer this correctly. The answer is because it's an addiction to the process of buying, in other words, acquiring, not the process of owning or consuming. So as previously discussed, advertising often has, shall we say, an exaggerated effect on those whose cognitive development is still in process. Let's take the case of smoking. Cigarette ads reach all ages, but 90% of new smokers are teenagers, according to the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Vulnerability to peer pressure tends to peak in adolescent and teen years. Also, the overuse of alcohol has been linked with academic failures, youth suicides, high school and campus violence, campus hazing, etc., etc., etc. Overeating and obesity is also a growing problem in the United States. 17% of children and teens are obese, and 1/3 of adults. In fact, binge eating has become so prominent that the new DSM-5 now includes it as an eating disorder. The marketing of junk foods and junk drinks really preys on this evolutionary vestigial urge that humans have that goes all the way back to hunting-gathering days. So I want you to think about this. Way back in hunting-gathering days, okay, one thing we know now is that the gathering was the majority of the diet. In other words, a hunt, the lipids and fats that you get from meat, the hunt was really rare compared to gathering. And so it was very important that people crave these lipids and fats. Even if they just ate, somebody came back with a hunt to share with the tribe, even if they just ate, even if they're not hungry, it was really important that they craved lipid and fats so that they would get them when they were available, because they weren't often available. Okay. Now, unfortunately, okay, that is what has been passed down to us through the ages. So if you think about the evolutionary aspect of this, human beings in hunting-gathering times who had that urge, biologically had that urge, craved lipids and fats, even when they were not hungry, were the ones who survived long enough to pass on their genes and become our ancestors. So now it's something that we see generally in human beings, not just scattered, but generally in human beings. Okay? Because those are the people who survived to pass their genes on to us today. So even today, when this is harmful, right? When these lipids and fats are overly abundant and available to us, okay? Especially in junk food and junk drinks. Even when it's so available to us, we have this vestigial urge left over from hunting and gathering days to crave these lipids and fats even when we're not hungry. Another consumption controversy is marketing practices that perpetuate compulsive gambling. Typically, the consumer first experiences a big win, right? Next, gambling becomes more reckless. And then losses pile up over time. And finally, gambling becomes a really central force in the individual's life. How? Well, Ironically, if you think about it, there's a feedback loop here, a psychological feedback loop. Stop and think. The more that the gambler becomes devastated by the debt, the more they tend to view gambling, another big win, as their only possible chance of salvation. Next, we have idealized images. Ads in Western societies are notorious for featuring exceptionally young, thin, and attractive female models and exceptionally attractive and muscular male models. Because the models represent Western society's conception of the ideal man or the ideal woman, they exemplify images that most men and women will never achieve. Tweens and teenagers are especially vulnerable to how their bodies compare with those of models. And females of all ages are especially judged and valued for their appearance in Western society. Taken to extreme, these idealized self-image values can lead to steroid abuse in teenage boys and young men, and eating disorders such as anorexia and bulimia, of which women are victims 10 times more frequently than men. The second to last consumption controversy on our list is privacy controversies. In recent years, a great deal of information is being collected, and when you browse the internet and use social media, your activity is often being tracked. Sometimes your geographical data is also being tracked through GPS technology. The proliferation of data available to marketers today is called big data. And as you can imagine, there are pros and cons associated with it. The main marketing purpose of using big data is to expose you to ads that are relevant to your interests, which we often appreciate, right? Because we are interested and because we're less likely then to be bombarded with ads for products that are not of our interest. However, the amount of information, the types of data, the security of that data, and the potential harmful uses are a real growing concern for consumers and for privacy advocates. Most websites now post privacy policies, but oftentimes they are difficult for a reasonable person to understand, and oftentimes do not offer complete explanations for the potential uses of the information. The last consumption controversy on our list is consumed consumers. This is the term that is used for people whose bodies are physically used for commercial gain in the marketplace. For instance, organ and blood donors, surrogate mothers, prostitutes even. Organ sales are an especially complex and interesting controversy. Although it is illegal to sell human organs, a so-called red market really thrives. The idea behind the law is if body parts were a commodity, only the wealthy would be able to afford them, and only the needy would be tempted to donate them at the risk of their own health. However, organs like kidneys are in really short supply and desperately needed. And legislators are currently considering the possibility of getting around the illegality of direct cash incentives by perhaps offering indirect ones. Some of the ones that they're considering right now are possibly retirement accounts or college scholarships. Okay? In other words, to be liquidated only in the future. Of course, critics still argue that this would still be a revenue by which the wealthy could buy the health of the needy.